I would say the biggest change that probably started last year was I started reaching that place where I am grateful, which is really, really hard because how do you be grateful when they're not here? But I have reached a point where I can look at everything and say, I am so glad and thankful that we had her for those 20 years, that she was here, that she touched our lives, and that we got to experience her. I would never want to go back and change that. I kind of struggle with that sometimes too, because to bring her back means that she's still going to be in pain. I don't think that's going to change, right? So for me to say that I'm grateful that she was here, also includes her pain as part of that life experience of hers.
Lana, thank you so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you just want to start by telling a little bit about Cashleigh and your loss.
Sure. Cashley is the youngest of my 4 children. She was 20. We lost her to her struggle with mental health December 2nd, 2022. She passed here at home. I was the one that found her on a Friday morning. It was her 3rd attempt. But I don't understand how, but it totally caught me off guard. It's so unexplainable how you're not prepared for something like that at all.
No, I don't feel like anything could prepare you for that.
Right. Like after several attempts, you have your guard up, right? And you're always concerned. And I always had her location and was always checking in with her and talking with her when she was home and things like that. But I really believed that she would never attempt again, truly.
And you were aware of the other attempts?
Yes, I was the one that found her all 3 times.
I know I had expressed to you that my mom attempted a few times as well. And I spoke to her after the last time, and she was more clear in that moment.
Right.
And I thought it was my fault, and I immediately just plummeted. I don't know if that's the right word, but I just plummeted, and I was telling her I was so sorry. And she very clear-headedly said, it's not your fault. I had been planning it, and I knew I didn't want to leave, but my brain was fighting against me.
Right. It's called intrusive thoughts. And Cashley had shared with me on several occasions for those years that I knew she was struggling, that's what she was fighting. It's part of depression, anxiety, PTSD is the way Cashley expressed it to me was it was a voice in her head that just kept saying, just do it. Just do it. This is never going to get better. Just do it. I have her phone, so I know everything she did in those last hours. I know that, and also from speaking to her after the first 2 attempts, there's a thing called a suicidal trance. It's just an altered state of consciousness, and they are not, I can't speak for every instance, but I know from talking with Cashley after the first 2 attempts and looking at her phone from her 3rd and final attempt, I know that she was not in control. Cashley, wasn't a person, she didn't like alcohol. I think the only drug she ever did was smoke marijuana. In order to sleep sometimes, she ate a gummy here and there, but she even got to the point where she didn't even like that. She wasn't altered from, drugs, even prescription drugs or anything like that. She was altered due to mental health from PTSD. So like you and I have discussed, when people say, oh, that's so selfish, or all they're doing is passing on the pain, they are not. I have said this on social media several times that, it's like when someone has a heart attack, you are not looking at them saying, stop it. You're making a choice. Stop it. You can't do that with mental health. Your brain is an organ, just like your heart is an organ. We lose people to cancer all the time. And sometimes we lose people to lung cancer, and they were lifelong smokers, right?
And you don't blame them.
We have never said, that they, I don't like the word, starts with a K, did that to themselves. We would never do that. We give so much grace and compassion and empathy to people that die from other lifestyle choices, right? But with suicide, for some reason, people think that people are doing it for attention. I don't know if this is a quote that actually came from Robin Williams or somewhere along the line it just got, attributed to him because they made it into a meme with his picture. But it says that people don't fake depression. They fake being okay. That's what happens. People just reach the end. They literally cannot help themselves.
It's so true. Me and my boyfriend were talking about it the other day too, because after my mom passed, I did not think it was going to get better. My mental health had never, ever been like that. And I was suicidal. It was like a battle because part of my brain was like, this is not how you normally think. And the other half was like, but it's never going to be better because you lost your mom. And I felt a lot of guilt for that.
Yeah. Why did you feel guilt?
I felt guilt because her number was blocked. She was supposed to move to Atlanta to be closer to me, and she got scared because it's a big move, and she was comfortable where she was, and she said she didn't want to, and my feelings got hurt.
Right.
And after my feelings got hurt, she forgot my birthday. So my feelings got hurt again. And she died from her lifestyle. I had to beg the coroners to do an autopsy because they knew my mom was an alcoholic. She technically died from hypertension, but it had been going on for a while. And I didn't realize the severity of it, but I think she knew something was wrong and she wasn't telling me. Then she told me she didn't want to live here. She started drinking again. And that was a huge trigger for me. Right. Because I didn't know what version I was going to get. And I was trying to protect myself. So I blocked her number.
I'm sorry that you feel bad. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I feel better about the guilt. I know alcoholism is a real thing. Addiction is a real thing. Mental health is a real thing. So I'm aware I was not the end all be all to why she drank. Yeah. But I do think I was a trigger for it. It's like too little too late, but I'm trying to learn from it.
Well, it's kind of like, even though she is no longer with us, when she was here and you guys were no contact, you were probably working on your own healing and protecting your own mental health. I know it seems final and that you're not working through it to have a better relationship with her, but she's still with you.
I know. I do believe that. I've had dreams and very specific signs that I know are her. Yeah. While I'm still thinking about the guilt, I watched, whenever I first contacted you, I saw a podcast you had done. You had mentioned that you felt guilt. The gentleman that was interviewing you did not understand. And he was kind of like battling you on it. And I was like, no, you don't do that. Like her guilt is valid.
As in any instance, for me, I'm Cashleigh's mom. As a mom, we have one job. Right. And I will take to my death that I failed her. And I don't need anybody. And I was trying to explain that to him. I don't, when I say that is me acknowledging it. That will stay with me forever. I've accepted that it's there. I was telling somebody else the other day that I've done a lot of support groups with other parents that have lost children to suicide. And I have met a lot of moms especially that have just internalized it, and it is just taken them over, and they're not okay, and it's really affected them, and it's the guilt. And every situation is different. In my situation, I know Cashleigh was loved, and I know she knew she was loved, and I know that she absolutely loved us. I still feel guilty though. The what ifs, of course, right? And I'm sure you have the same thing. But what I've done is I've said, thankfully through lots of therapy, I have said, I acknowledge it. It's valid for me to feel guilty. And I don't say it so that somebody else will make me feel better and say, no, Lana, I was around you guys. I knew, Cashleigh knew how much she loved you. Well, first of all, she didn't leave because she thought that I didn't love her. She left because she suffered from PTSD and she was not coherent, not in control that night. So I say that's valid that I feel like that. I'm still here. But I point to here because in my mind, it's right here. And I say, that guilt can live right there. You can stay right there. And I'll visit you sometimes. But you're not going to keep me up at night like you did the first few weeks or things like that. You are not going to keep me in bed all day. That would not honor Cashleigh. You're not going to ruin my life. And I'm not going to allow it to get any bigger. You're there. You exist. You have a very valid reason for being there. But you're going to stay right there. I have a mission and I have things to do. Blaming myself for Cashleigh's passing is not in the cards. And I also say, too, that, you know how well, I'm 58, so I remember when we had like big grandfather clocks in the homes, right? Or even just the little clocks that sit on the countertop or whatever. And they have like the pendulum, right? I have always believed that everything in life is like a pendulum. So if I'm going to say that it's my fault and I am responsible for Cashleigh's passing, I would also have to say that there is just like that's the pendulum, right? I would also have to believe that there is something that I could do that would literally force her to do that, right? You've got the middle ground, but both sides of it are I could force her or I could have kept her from doing it, right? You got to find that middle ground because I didn't keep her, but I also know that I could have never looked at Cashleigh and done anything to make her do it. I could never said anything or made her feel a certain way that was not our relationship. I'm not that kind of a person. So I have to believe that even though I couldn't save her, I also didn't force her to do it. So that's my healthy way of trying to step back and look at things. And we're a little over 2 years out. When did your mom pass? I know you had told me.
2023, April 21st.
Okay. All right.
So
about 4 months after I lost Cashleigh. So we're along the same timeline for sure. And also, I have people that say things like, oh, I've never lost a child. I only lost my mom, or, it was just my brother. Or just. Don't say just. We don't compare grief. Because if that person that you lost is your person, then it's the same. There's different ways that we lose them that are, harder or, more traumatic and things like that. But, grief is grief.
Exactly. And I feel like, like the different ways it happens. Mm-hmm. So many things affects the way you grieve. So like comparing them doesn't really do anyone any justice. No,
there's no preparation. My dad passed in 1997. He had prostate cancer and he struggled with that for, I think he was first diagnosed in 93 or 94. And I was not prepared. That was horrible. He was at that time, my dad was my favorite person in the whole wide world. He was the only person I ever felt unconditional love from. And losing him, although I lived here out of state in Las Vegas and he lived back home in Idaho, knowing that I could not pick up the phone anymore and talk to him, leveled me. But that's grief. Grief is love. I couldn't show him that anymore. He couldn't show me. So that's the same thing with your mom. I'm no contact with my mom, and she had to have a pacemaker sometime last year. And I interrupted the no contact to tell her I love her because I thought if something happens to her, I don't want to leave it at that. But since then, it's just the same thing. Just a month ago, she was on the phone with me and did the thing that I've begged her not to do. And I stopped her and said, Mom, please don't mention that person's name. And she got mad at me and hung up on me, which is, I had mentioned just yesterday that, I find it strange that when we're having a phone conversation, she cannot help herself but mention that person's name. But she does not mention Cashleigh's name.
And I know what you're referring to because I had watched the interview. Yeah. I didn't know if you wanted to share that or not, because it was part of Cashleigh's PTSD.
It's the, and they also say too, when we lose somebody to their struggle with mental health, there's never just one reason. It happens like a perfect storm, right? So, Cashleigh told us that she was sexually abused by one of my nephews. I've been very vocal about it. She told us in the family. She wrote it in her letter to us. She told all of her therapists about it. I tried to do something with the police. They will not do anything. So I let it go. I can't continue to fight that. But, people have chosen sides, and that's fine.
You lost Cashleigh a little over 2 years.
Yep, just a little over 2 years ago, yeah.
What showed up in your grief that you were not expecting?
One thing that didn't, I'm going to start with that, was anger. I honestly have maybe spent 5 minutes with anger towards Cashleigh. I know there's a lot of people that are angry at their loved one. How could they do this to me? But of course, I'm one of those people, especially if I can't sleep at night, which has been a lot the past 2 years. I've went down the rabbit hole of mental health, PTSD, intrusive thoughts, all of those things, and come to the realization that, and two, I always say, try to think about your loved one, who they are, who they were when they were here. Cashleigh never hurt anyone. We never raised our voices. She was a 20-year-old girl, so she was not thrilled with everything I said and did. But, we never had words and argued. It was never like that. And neither did she have a relationship like that with her siblings. So, I know she wasn't mad at us. I know that's not why she did that. So I didn't spend any time being angry with Cashleigh. I understood that, especially after I finally got her letter 3 months later. The thing that came up in my grief that really surprised me was different than like when my dad passed. I've lost all my grandparents, lost my aunt, my uncle that I was close to. That was like, 2 degrees of separation away. Losing Cashleigh, being so close to her, it just wiped me out. I felt physically ill. It took me a few months to even want to eat. When my dad passed, I remember I was 7 months pregnant, first of all, so I had to eat. But I remember feeling guilty for being able to take a shower. When Cashleigh passed, I just didn't want to do anything, and it did. It took me a few months to say that's enough, and catch myself and say, this is, I cannot. I still had 3 other children, her older siblings and my granddaughter. I have a sister that I'm very close to and her daughters. I have very good friends that have become my family and my major support system. So I knew that I had to be okay and figure it out. Because I could, right? I wasn't at the end of my rope. People comment all the time. As you probably see me on social media, and people comment all the time, I lost my dad, but, if I lost a child, I would just die. I've even commented sometimes and said, I died. Because there was Lana Gruell, right, before December 2nd, 2022. And now there's Lana Gruell after. She is not the same person. Not one bit. And it's not just about, I see how precious life is. I see how serious things are. And I see how my own misconceptions and my own faults and dysfunctions played into it. I want to affect change. And I'm determined to do it with, my own life. But also, that's why I'm so vocal about it, is a lot of parents, a lot of families, when they lose a loved one to the struggle with mental health, they pull back. Right? It's embarrassing. It's always had a stigma. We don't talk about it. It's a shame thing. But for me, I just feel like, honestly, the nerve of me to not talk about it, right? The nerve of me to not validate what she went through. My messages are so full of people reaching out to me and saying, I identify so much with Cashleigh's story. I was sexually abused as a child. I blocked it out for however many years. And unfortunately, a lot of times what happens is they try to tell their mom, a parent, a sibling, a trusted adult, and they get shamed and told that, that never happened. Just like my family that I'm no contact with says, there's no way. Which, and a lot of people do, they hold on to their dysfunction so tightly that they are willing to lose the relationship because they are not prepared. And, for me, that's fine. I've lost Cashleigh, so I don't care. That was the worst case scenario. My other 3 kids and I always talk about that. Losing Cashleigh was the worst thing that could have happened to us. I got nothing else to lose, is how I feel about it. So why not speak up?
You said you didn't feel a lot of anger towards Cashleigh. You said for like maybe 5 minutes. Did you feel anger
towards other people? Absolutely. Yes, I did. And, I had to put that in check. I said, I'm going to do everything that I can do in order to, bring justice. Here in Nevada, of course, every state's different. Here in Nevada, you've got 20 years if you were a child. And so in mine and Cashleigh's mind, she had time to make a police report and do what she needed to do. But after she passed, I got all of her records and everything. I had to fight with the police to even get them to take the information and file a report. I had to make a petition on change.org and get almost 5,000 signatures for the Las Vegas police to even call me back and say, we're sorry that so-and-so told you. I went to 2 places here in town and was told at both places, there's no victim statement. We can't even take the report. And my thing is how do you investigate murders? And why aren't the medical records? Okay, maybe you can't take mine and her siblings and maybe her best friend's testimony, right, that this happened. But what about the therapy records where she names this person? right? And also he was 23 and she was 8. Let that sink in. But we're so busy victim shaming, right? And like my family, one of my sisters, his mom and my mom, and of course him, I'll say, why didn't she say anything? Back to the victim shaming thing. Well, for one, my youngest 3 have always been scared of him. I want the world to get past the point where we hold the victims accountable and not the aggressors. It's shameful, actually, to point the finger at her. And even if she was still here, right? And let's say that, here it is, 2025, and she finally said, because what she had told me back when she told me about it, of course, I wanted to call the police. I wanted to drive to Idaho, right? And she begged me. She said, please just let me work on my healing. Let me get some strength. She blocked it out for so long. It was really affecting her. And, she really just wanted to get to a place where she felt like she had a little bit more strength before she started the fight. And I gave her that. Who was I to say she couldn't have that? So, yeah, that was my anger. And then too, at the psychiatric community, her psychiatrist, although I think her psychiatrist cared for her deeply, and she's a very kind human being, I believe that instead of diagnosing her with some type of a mental illness and telling her that something was wrong with her, that she should have been referred for EMDR, PTSD treatment. That was the crux of what was going on with her. Can you imagine not being able to sleep? I mean, I can, because I know what it feels like now. But here was a young woman, graduated from high school, was trying to work, trying to get enrolled in college, and she couldn't sleep. I know how difficult it is the next day to try to function when I can't sleep. But, with her, it was common. It was something that happened all the time. So I think way too many people these days are diagnosed with something and given medications. And then when they go back for their 2-week appointment or monthly appointment, and then the psychiatrist says, oh, that's not working. Well, let's lessen the dose, or let's, change the dose higher, or here, let's try this manufacturer's. And instead of doing that and putting them on what I call the medication carousel, maybe try validating the fact that they are literally suffering from PTSD. There's no pill that's going to make a human being forget that they were sexually abused by an adult male when they were a child. Not one of those pills made her forget that. But some of them made her suicidal. Some of them made her gain weight. Some of them made her lose weight. Some of them kept her awake at night. Some of them made her sleep so much that she couldn't get up for work the next morning. Not one of them helped her process the fact that she was remembering that she was sexually abused when she was 8 years old. So there's my anger for that. And again, it's all valid.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to try to shame me about that. There was a lot of things at play that last night. I was angry at our local hospital, the ER. Part of what I've said on social media too is that Cashleigh had asthma and allergies. And the night before we lost her, she had an allergic reaction to something. We ate dinner. She got up, took a shower, got out of the shower, came in my room, and her face was all swollen. Her ears were even swollen to where she couldn't put her finger in her ear. Her mouth was swollen. And it was all red. We used to call it hot dog face because it happened a lot with her. And I said, throw on some sweats, let's go. And I drove her down to the ER. When we were there, they asked if she's allergic to any medications. And I said, she's allergic to prednisone. And they said, well, what happens when she takes prednisone? I said, she has hallucinations. And they go, oh, well, that's a adverse effect, not an allergic, reaction. And we both said, she has PTSD. She cannot have hallucinations. The only other time she had that medication was in 2015. And she woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning screaming and crying saying, Mom, my arm is a bag of potato chips. There's people on my ceiling. So, yeah, she's allergic, right? I was like, she cannot have that. And what did they do? They shot 150 milligrams in her IV, right?
It's so messed up.
It is ridiculously messed up. And unfortunately, we live in a state where I only had 1 year while I was grieving, right? I only had 1 year to try to find an attorney to sue the hospital. They should have never given. I could sign into her patient portal today. I've already printed it all off. I already got it all from them. I got a court order to get all of her medical records. And every doctor she had been to, she said allergies was prednisone. It's in their patient portal of hers. We told them. They still gave her 150 milligrams and then just sent us on our way, like, no big deal. If I would have known, I would have slept in a room with her. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have left her unattended. I wouldn't have done a lot of things. She was gone 24 hours later. I have her phone. I know what she was thinking. She was the only text and reached out to one person. I was right across the hall. Darian, one of my other children, Cashleigh and them were very best friends. and they shared a Jack and Jill bathroom. Cashley could have knocked on the wall, but again, she was not okay. And she texted the one person and said, please pick up the phone. I'm scared something's wrong. I don't feel okay. Something's going on. She wasn't like that. Her and I texted each other at, like 10:15. She went to go get some food, and she got home about 11:15. I could see the doorbell video. I heard her laughing in her bedroom across the hallway. Found her the next morning at 8:52. So, there's a lot of factors into that. Again, there's a thing, you can Google it, about the glass of water theory about suicide. It's like, people say, this person did that because of this. But it's like their glass of water just became so full, and it was just overflowing, and they just can't take it anymore. And I imagine that night, Cashleigh probably thought that she was actually losing her mind and that there was no coming back. She just ended it.
Which, especially with what you said, the hospital like that.
Yeah.
And how she
prednisone
reacted.
is no joke for people that don't even have hallucinations. I have friends that have rheumatoid arthritis, and every once in a while I have to take prednisone. November 2023, the sciatic nerve started acting up, and they prescribed me prednisone. I did not want to take it, but I had never taken it before, I don't think, so I didn't know if I was going to have a reaction. Thankfully, it helped me. When you are, you can't just taper off. You can't just quit it cold turkey. You have to taper off. You can even Google it. It's a very, very small percentage of people that have that type of reaction to it, but it happens. And for the hospital to just discard that is unforgivable. But again, I would have had to be able to do something within the first year. And now they're just off the hook, and my child's gone.
Do you still hold anger towards the hospital, or
Absolutely.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
I would too.
It's wrong. But as women, we get a lot of that from the medical community, right? They know better. We don't know our bodies. We don't know anything. And my children are biracial. If they're not with me and we don't announce that I'm their mother, it's my perception and their perception that the world just looks at them and says they're black. So, I believe as a white woman, I already don't get heard by the medical community, and nobody can tell me that doesn't happen more to women of color. And here they just looked at this young black woman and probably were like, it happens more than it doesn't.
You said that this was Cashleigh's third attempt. Did you feel any sort of anxiety before the third one? Because with my mother, I did. Anytime she called or I got a phone call, I thought,
or you can't get a hold of her. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
You felt that same.
Absolutely. It's like shell shocked, right? And I just constantly was checking her location, texting her. I look back at my texts with her, especially that last year, more times than not. She was a very smart person, very sharp. There's no way she didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't be very slick about it, right? But and especially when you're close to someone, changes in mood and mannerisms and expressions and tone of text and things like that. And anytime I picked up on that, I would move in a little, but it's such a delicate dance that we have, right? And Darian and I talk about this a lot, how while we're feeling guilty about it, right, we also have to acknowledge how we felt like, and rightly so, we needed to be so careful in how we approached Cashleigh when we were worried about her. Because, there were times where we didn't have anything to worry about and she was okay. But it was probably just a trigger, us just over worrying, right? And you don't want to make your person feel like you don't trust them or you think that they're not intelligent, right? Or just flat out crazy, as the world would say. So it's a delicate dance. I felt like that last year of her life, I felt like it's crazy, Libby, because I look back at it and in 2022, I feel like all I did was wait for her next attempt. Also, that caught me so off guard because I really believed her when she cried after the first two attempts and said, Mom, I don't want to leave. I do not want to be away from, you guys. I love you guys. I'm so sorry. I really believed her. I didn't get it. I say to a lot of moms, I get a lot of messages from moms that say, looking back, what do you wish you would have done differently? And one thing I wish I would have done differently is I wish I would have taken my ass and put myself in therapy. And I feel like she needed me to be whole. And had I been into therapy and talking with them about my concerns and what's going on with her, maybe I would have been more enlightened on how to help her. Or, worst case scenario, how to be more present for her. If all I had was 1 year left with her, right? I think I could have been better for her.
And it's crazy because from the time I believe I was like 6, my mom tried to OD a few times when I was a child.
My gosh.
As an adult. What you said, I'm not going to say the hows,
yeah.
But she tried. She tried multiple times throughout my whole life, multiple different ways. And I had PTSD from that.
Yeah. Had you ever been the one to find her?
So the worst time as an adult, she called me. I could tell she had been drinking and she was like, I'm sorry. And she was saying bye.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, what's going on? I was like, what are you doing? And nothing I was saying was working. So I just was trying tactics. And so I started like being angry. I was like, and I apologized like tenfold to her after she was more coherent about this, because I was like, if you do it, you don't love me. Like I was just trying things and it's not true, but like in the moment. And she hung up on me and she wouldn't answer. And I was 4 hours away. So I called the cops and they went.
Felt bad for doing that.
Oh, yes. But she was like, you saved my life, because the cops called me and told me the scenario. They were like, if we would not have came, I did not find her, but I was down there the second they let her out of the hospital, because they do the hold.
Yeah.
And I saw her place. Mm-hmm. And so, that was very, very, very triggering. You're not prepared. I had hoped she would not try again.
Yeah.
And there were a few times I know she did, and she didn't tell me, like her friends told me.
Right. Yeah. And again, I believed Cashleigh. After those first 2 attempts, we talked, and she just cried and was like, I'm so, because for her, the kind of person that she was, she never wanted to hurt anyone. So to see me cry, and her siblings and her best friend and, things like that, that hurt her to see us, that she hurt us. But again, she also told me under no unclear terms that she had no memory of what she did. She even asked me, what did I do? And I was like, you went here, and then you went here, and then I found you. And she was like, I don't remember any of it. So again, her third attempt, I know that she just, it wasn't her. Yeah. I know if she could take it back, she would come back. There was things she wanted to do. She had gotten a college scholarship. She was already doing her intake exams for college. She wanted to study sign language and work with children. She wanted to be a mom. That's the only thing that child ever wanted to do, was to be a mom. She loved kids, and they loved her.
When you first lost Cashleigh to now, how has your grief changed?
First of all, I want to reiterate that time does not heal all wounds. It does not. That is a lie, and it is just an old school thing that, people say. It's like people saying she's in a better place. Is she? I don't know. Do you know where she is? Right? There's days where I stand in our front room and look at her urn and say, where the hell are you? Where are you? It's so hard, especially as a parent, right, to not know where my child is. It's not a religious thing. It is a life and death thing. It is a physical and a spiritual afterlife thing. We all have our different beliefs on what happens after our earthly bodies are gone. I will say, for me, with my grief, at first, it was like just getting punched in the gut. And it was that every day, one of the things that I've shared, and I say I've become an accidental youth mental health advocate, but one of the things that I've been very open about and sharing is the doorbell video from when the paramedics got here. You see that moment that was, I want to say, maybe 14 minutes after I found her, called 911. I was screaming, my baby's dead. The operator was like, ma'am, how old's your baby? And I was like, she's 20. Not a baby, but my baby. And she was like, well, do you want to try CPR? And I'm not going to go into it, but, she was obviously gone. So I hung up with them and stayed with Cashleigh, just kissed her and loved on her, because I knew once they got there, that was over. And, that first day was just so hard. You can see I was wailing, I was on the ground, and that just came and went for the next few months and weeks. Over time, I can do this. I can talk about her. Not every time. There's times still where I break down and, I've always said lay on the bathroom floor and scream and dry heave, that I still do that. I don't do it as often. Right. So it softens just because, the world keeps turning. And I have 3 children still here. I have a granddaughter that I have to show up for. I don't have to. I want to. I do not want to be checked out and my family and my loved ones to just think about how sad it is that, I've changed, but I'm not going to check out. And I'm slowly but surely able to have more conversations where I don't break down, talk about her more. I would say the biggest change that probably started last year was I started reaching that place where I am grateful, which is really, really hard because how do you be grateful when they're not here? But I have reached a point where I can look at everything and say, I am so glad and thankful that we had her for those 20 years, that she was here, that she touched our lives, and that we got to experience her. I would never want to go back and change that. I kind of struggle with that sometimes too, because to bring her back means that she's still going to be in pain. I don't think that's going to change, right? So for me to say that I'm grateful that she was here, also includes her pain as part of that life experience of hers. But I'm realizing that there's people here on earth that are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and they've had all those years, and they still haven't done what Cashleigh accomplished in just 20 years. And she was just a 20-year-old young woman, but she did so much and touched so many. And she was way, way, way beyond her years. She was really enlightened. The term old soul, I think, is so overused, but that's for a reason. You can recognize an old soul. I personally could not even draw a stick figure, and Cashleigh, this was her last major piece of art. She did that October 2022. I think she did it in a day. I have the pictures that she took from when she sketched it on the canvas to the first layer, the second, and to the final. She was holding it in our backyard by the koi pond. 58. I couldn't do this in 58 years.
Me either.
Right? Not just with art, just with her way, with who she was and how she dealt with people. She taught me things. I had I tell the story about her hair. When she was I think she was like a freshman in high school. She said that she wanted to cut her hair off because of the way I was raised. My stupid, long-held, ridiculous beliefs. I thought that girls have to have long hair. You can't be pretty without long hair, right? And all girls should want to be pretty. I am embarrassed to even have that come out of my mouth. But I loved Cashleigh so much, mainly because of the way that she was. And she would just bring something to light and show you, put a mirror in front of yourself, right? Without being combative or cruel about it. And she told me, she said, why is it that you have no problem with Dante having long hair? Dante's my now almost 27-year-old son. And she says, you never care if Dante wants to cut his hair off or leave it long. You never say anything. But because I have, female parts, I'm not supposed to cut my hair off. And she barely even got that out of her mouth. And I was like, just let's go cut your hair off. How stupid is that of me, right? And we went and we got it cut. She said to hear it first, and she wasn't pleased with that. So I think it was a few weeks later we went and she got it cut even shorter all the way around. I think I must have told her 1,000 times how sorry I was for being wrong about that and trying to enforce that on her, because short hair suited her so well and it was like her true self. And it was just so much more authentic for her. She embraced it. And she still played with wigs, and sometimes she went and got it braided, and she always changed up her hair. But that's just one example of just who she was. And the fact that she didn't stomp her feet, as a high school girl and go, "You're so ridiculous, Mom."
Mm-hmm.
She, like an adult, well, like most adults that I know don't even, communicate that way. They're not even that enlightened to communicate. She just knew how to get her point across in a very good way, without harming the other person at all, without having an argument. She just was like, this is it. We just had kind of different beliefs and stuff, and she always brought that out. I think all of our kids make us better people in a way. That was the thing.
What would your loss with Cashleigh is very, very new still, in my opinion.
Yep, it is. It's only been 2 years and a little over a month.
Has your grief changed any from the immediate loss to now, or what is the biggest change in that amount of time?
The biggest changes is that it is softer. And I've been in support groups talking with other moms that have lost children and met other moms that have lost children to many things. I've met women that lost a child 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 10, 5. It's still a pain, but again, it softens, right? And we learn to live around it, and give it a place and acknowledge it. But my other 3 kids and I, and my granddaughter, we just know that the best way to grieve Cashleigh is to honor her. And we try so hard to do that.
I wanted to say this earlier. I've been saying this so much lately. I saw a quote and it changed everything for me. It said, it was something along the lines of, when I see my loved one again, I don't want to tell them I died when they did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah,
I was like, that is so, they would be heartbroken.
It is. Yeah. And I know Cashleigh would be. I know that, again, because she never wanted to hurt us. So if she sees us, I don't want her to see us ruined and leveled and broken and decimated and fractured. A lot of times, you already see, I've told you about what's happened with my estranged, family members. But me and my children and my granddaughter, that's our family unit, and we're not going anywhere. I can't say that we're stronger from it, but this will not break us, because that wouldn't honor Cashleigh. It just would not. It's funny. I have not spent one day laying in bed all day crying, grieving since losing Cashleigh. I've had a couple of friends say, that I think in their mind they think that that's what I've done because I post so much on social media. And the loss and the grief, but that's my way of processing it. Some parents can't look at pictures of their lost child. That makes me feel connected with Cashleigh still, so I'm able to do that. But I am not laying in bed letting the world pass me by, because I know she would not want me to do that. And there's days where my grief was really heavy at the very, very beginning. I could hear Cashleigh, not so much audibly, but like it was like a weight on my chest. And I could hear her saying, she was funny. She used to say, Lana, she was really funny. I can hear her saying, Lana, get it together. So I got to keep pushing,
What advice would you give someone early in their grief journey?
Yeah. My best advice is try to just drink enough water. I couldn't, food, I did not care. I think I went for days just on water. Our nerves are just not set up to handle that. You just feel like you're living in an alternate universe and everything is just like, right? And it's so unreal. I just felt like I was floating. So, those first few days, stay alive.
You saying the alternate universe, it makes me want to ask you, do you ever experience, I'll be fine and then it will hit me?
Yeah.
But not in like a grief way. It's like, she's really not here.
It's like, boom.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am, doing something normal that I would just stand there and do dishes. And all of a sudden your brain goes, did you forget Cashleigh's dead? No. But did you have to do that?
Yeah.
The brain just, yeah. I could have been doing anything, nothing that would have reminded me of her or, and the worst is when, you start to laugh or enjoy yourself. And then all of a sudden, your grief brain says, you're laughing? Yeah. That's weird. You must have forgot Cashleigh's dead. Yeah.
The first time I laughed, I immediately cried.
Yeah. Yeah, we do that a lot. We do that a lot. Cashley had a very, very, very dark sense of humor. And here at home, sometimes one of us will just say something and the rest of us will go, and, we're like, I didn't even think of that. And it came out of my mouth. So, we know that Cashley had to be interjecting, using whichever one of us, to try to make the rest of us laugh. But I mean, sometimes it's just like so dark that we're like, don't do that again. You gotta at some point just say, I am still here and I can't go anywhere, right? So I gotta live, and I've started, until I'm ready to release Cashleigh's cremains, and I'm nowhere near ready, and she didn't say when, so I'll know when it is. She'll tell me when it is, but it's not anytime soon. I have her urn here at home, and I'm starting Christmas. Last month, I have started decorating her urn, and I'm just going to keep doing it. When she was here on her birthday, both of my girls, I always made them wear like a birthday girl tiara thing. So for Cashleigh on her urn, I bought her a reindeer thing urn, headband thing, and put it on her urn. I put a Happy New Year one on it. Today she's got the red one with the heart on the little springs. She'll have a birthday one in March and probably a St. Patrick's Day one. And I'm just going to keep doing it. She's still here. She's just on that side.
I believe that too.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that you have a lot of resources that you wanted to talk about.
Right. A lot of the messages that I get on social media are people that need resources. I wish that I would have found a lot of this before we lost Cashleigh. There's an organization called RAINN, RAINN.org, and it's the Rape and Incest National Network. I think that's right, but they help victims of sexual abuse. I wish we would have known about that. Since losing Cashleigh, I've found a community of grieving moms. They help me feel seen and heard. They help me understand that everything that I'm feeling and thinking about losing Cashleigh, they feel and think as well. Not exactly the same way. It all shows up differently, but I'm not crazy. I'm not being overdramatic. I'm not losing my mind. This is real. This is normal. I'm on the same course as these other women. And that's helped me greatly, just to know that I have that community there. And I believe, you look at people that are suffering from depression, anxiety, drug abuse, alcohol abuse. They're hurting. They need help. They need treatment. People that lost a loved one and are just feeling their grief so deeply because they feel so alone. People need resources. There's literally a support group out there for almost everything. And on our website for the Cashley Foundation, we have a whole resources tab for all kinds of resources. Anything that's really going on. We've got a whole section, a whole page that's, there's other parents that have reached out and said, I just lost my son last month. He lost his struggle with mental health too. And I can't get out of bed. I don't know how to go on. There's a resource for that. There's, I'm not the one. I don't know, I can stay in contact with them, but, I'm not trained. But there's an organization called Helping Parents Heal. And they have I think it's called Caring Listeners, where you can just call and listen to these people who volunteer and will just talk to the parent, moms and dads, about their child loss, any child loss. It's not just if your child was a teenager, stillbirth is child loss. Miscarriage is child loss. We all have different levels of what we can handle and, what affects us. And it should be validated as such. But so there's Helping Parents Heal. Alliance of Hope is a wonderful organization. They have support groups and a whole online forum. Helping Parents Heal has private groups on Facebook for parents that have lost. And Helping Parents Heal also has a separate support group for siblings that have lost a sibling to suicide. If you've lost a loved one to a specific type of cancer, there's support groups for that. So, yes. Yeah, we've, and the thing of it is, people like, you had one of your podcasts. I just made a reel today using the clip from it where you said grief is real. And we're told, society tells us, not to talk about it. It makes people uncomfortable and things like that. But that's all changing. And it's a wonderful thing. And there are all kinds of grief support groups out there. There's even, as a matter of fact, tomorrow night here in Las Vegas, taking my granddaughter to her children's grief support group. There's a place here in Las Vegas called Adam's Place, and they do what's called Camp Cope. And they have children who have lost a loved one that come and break up into age-appropriate groups, and they do activities. It's a safe place where if they want to talk that day about what they're feeling, what they're thinking, the person that they miss, what happened, what they're worried about, anything like that. And they have, it's part of the Dougie, I can't remember, it's DOUGY.org, I believe. And if you go on the website and put in your zip code for the U.S., there's Dougie organizations all over the United States. You know, I lost my dad in 1997. It's just been the past few years that my middle sister and I that I'm close with, that we openly talk about Dad. Back when he first of all passed, everybody was like, they don't want to talk about it. That's upsetting. We don't want to cry about it. I hate when people say, I was with the same man for almost 9 years. I remember we split up a couple months after Cashleigh passed away. And I remember at some point he said to me, Cashleigh wouldn't want you to be, sad. It really pissed me off, and I remember thinking to myself, well, I didn't want Cashleigh to die. And I know if I would have died and Cashleigh was here and he would have been crying, Cashleigh would have never said to him, Mom wouldn't want you to cry. Because really what that is that person telling you, you're making me uncomfortable, shut the hell up.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
And that's rude. That is very rude and not empathetic at all. And it's selfish. And I just know that if any one of us would have passed and Cashleigh would have been here, she would have never told anybody basically to stop crying or don't talk about it, it upsets me. She would have embraced it. She would have comforted us. So I'm not going to do that about her.
And you started a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
Would you like to share about that?
Yep. It's called the Cashley Foundation. Imagine that. And we came up with all kinds of names, right? And at the end of the day, I just said, it honors her. It's in honor of her. She's the whole reason for it. So that's what it's going to be named. And our whole purpose is youth mental health advocacy at some point. And I have an idea of how to make this work. But of course, everything takes funding. And I work a whole separate job. Like I've said, the world goes around. It doesn't stop. We still have to get up and go to work. We still have to do our jobs. So if I could just focus on this foundation full time, of course, I would be a very happy person. But, it would make me feel better to feel like I'm doing more. Our mission is to provide free telehealth talk therapy to youth in every state around the country. And of course, every state has a different age of consent for mental health treatment. So we have to abide by that. But, I get phone calls, emails, messages all the time from either parents or youth that are struggling, that don't know where to turn, that are just literally at the ends of their rope. And I remember that. Trying to find help for Cashleigh. The first time she needed therapy, that we were trying to find the therapist, because the year before she'd asked me about it, and I wish I would have just said yes and not asked her what was wrong. I think that she would have got in right away that year, because then we put it off because she backed off and didn't want to tell me what was going on, wasn't ready to tell me everything. So we ended up trying to find her a therapist in 2020. And that was ridiculous. That was like chasing our tail. So I know that trying to find a therapist that takes your insurance or that charges on a sliding scale, right, will meet via telehealth or in person, it's a struggle. So what I do is I try just on my own through the foundation to try to connect licensed therapists across the country for the people that do reach out to me. But we hope to, and at first we were thinking we were going to have a whole separate website and maybe have different chapters all over the country, kind of like Moms Demand Action. Shannon Watts created that nationwide, and all these chapters nationwide fighting for gun reform. That's something maybe that, we would try to do with the foundation. And basically the way that we believe that we could achieve the goal is by going as the go-between with all of the students that are trying to get their licenses, that need to complete their clinical hours. Before you can graduate, like in Nevada, you have to do 500 clinical hours of therapy. And here, like just say at UNLV, in order to do that, that department just gives them a handout and says, here. So they're going to call like the Women's High Desert Prison or, different other organization. Part of the problem with Nevada is that those interns have to have a brick and mortar, right? And our model is completely online. so that youth can do it without having to have transportation. They could do it on their phone. They could go to the park and do it if they, have a telehealth appointment with their therapist away from their parents, right? Sometimes the home is the problem. So they need to have autonomy from their parents. They don't need to have insurance. They don't need to have a copay. They just need a cell phone. No transportation. So that's our model. So we can't provide the interns at UNLV with a brick and mortar. So I got to try to find a workaround with that. But I know in other states you don't have to. But again, everything takes funding. It takes time. We've got to keep applying for grants and, get the funding so that, it's something that we can work on full time instead of off hours, from my regular job.
And I do believe that will happen.
I really do too. I actually have had kind of a epiphany recently, and I need to run it by our board about how we can partner with another organization that already kind of does that. And maybe we just serve as a level of support to do that. Because to me, it's more about, I want to, if somebody already has this established, like this entity does, they already have the platform, and we can just come in and say, we're going to do this part, and it's going to be maybe a separate tab, right, for the youth support. And then we just do the work as the in-betweens with the interns. And I kind of feel like that's the way to go. I've got two organizations that I'm thinking of, approaching with this.
Well, I think it will be great. And I do think it will happen sooner than later.
Yeah. Me too. It's needed. And I think that the model is solid. And, rather than wait till, let's say we don't do it, right? And also I want to interject too that, we're not trying to be crisis support because we already have 988. 988 is amazing. We need to get rid of the stigma with 988. I know a lot of people think, if I call 988, then the police are coming to my house. That's not true. And you can even just text with them. They're going to do the intake just to make sure that you're okay. You don't have an active plan. But after that, they were I have Cashleigh's phone. She texted with them. These are just other human beings that know how to help someone through a rough patch, and sometimes just talking helps. So we're not trying to be crisis support. What we want to do is help young people work through whatever they're dealing with right now, right? And when I say youth, I mean, 12, 14 to 24-ish. I think about my own life. If I could have talked with somebody when I was young and processed anything that I was dealing with as a young person from childhood, imagine I would have been a better mother. I would have been a better significant other, would have been a better coworker, would have been a better friend, right? A better neighbor. And I think that reaching youth in that age group, we're going to help them be better people. That's going to make a better world. And then the other part of it too is if we work with the colleges and universities, helping with these interns that need to perform their clinical hours, we're going to push more therapists through the system, which is going to lessen the shortage of providers, which is a huge problem. We're literally losing lives because they can't reach help. It needs to be accessible. Some people don't have the $60 for the copay. That's a shame. But again, in all of my research and all of my dealings with people online and such, I've found resources. I'm hoping to have a phone call with them to find out more about them. There's an organization called Telehealth, and they provide free services. You got to meet certain criteria, but boom. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Somebody's already doing it. Let's push them to it. The importance is finding the resources and funneling people towards the right ones that they need, right? I also wanted to say to you too, you mentioned that your mom was on a hold, like a mental health hold. Mm-hmm. I don't know what state, and you don't have to tell me, but I'm just curious. Here in Nevada, it's a 3-day hold. Was it 3 days or?
I believe it was 3 days. Yeah. And they would not let her call me or anything.
Oh, really? See, no. Here in Nevada, Cashleigh could call.
Yeah, no, they would not let her call me. I called and called and called, begging to talk to her.
Yeah, they let her use their phone, but she didn't have her phone. But they let her use her phone, and she called and talked to me.
That might have been the case here, and she just didn't want to.
That could be, yeah.
Because I know she was very embarrassed it happened.
Yeah.
And
again, though, why aren't people embarrassed that they had a heart attack?
I know.
Why aren't people embarrassed that they broke their arm?
It's an organ.
It is an organ.
And people don't connect. We don't get regular brain scans. We don't do any of those things.
No.
We don't connect it as an organ.
That's
and
right.
It is.
Right. I do not use the term, and I try to correct people when they say, struggling with their demons, because that puts the onus also on the person who is struggling with their mental health, that they just don't believe in God enough. And if that's the case, then again, why are there people dying of cancer? They must have wanted to die, right? Because if the belief in God is enough to keep someone alive and heal them, I mean, Jesus, we wouldn't have a population problem, right? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so true that, there is a bad outlook on mental health altogether. So
I asked about the hold because when Cashleigh left both places on the first 2 attempts, brought home the paperwork from there, but there was no pamphlet put in her hand with resources. Their resources, like, you can sign up for our intensive outpatient group. No mention of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. No mention of the RAIN network. No mention of NAMI. Cashley participated in an online support group through NAMI. She was in a webinar thing, Zoom, with other people that were struggling with their mental health. That's, if you're struggling with your mental health, that's where you need to be. You don't need to be with the people that are telling you should just smile more. You just need to go out for a walk. You should get out in nature more.
And I do feel like they don't give the resources intentionally.
Right. Because they want you to pay for their outpatient program. Right. Mm-hmm. They don't want you to know. Right. And that's another thing.
I mean, it's the same thing with like American diet literally leads to certain like some of the food industry owns the medication that food causes the illness of. Mm-hmm. So I feel like as long as someone is mentally not okay, they will see that person again and make money off of them.
That's right. Yep.
It's disgusting.
Yeah. And along those lines too, instead of the medication carousel for people taking, struggling with their mental health and being prescribed psychiatric medications, there is a genetic test that can be administered to determine which psychiatric medication your particular DNA responds best to.
Really?
There's a genetic test for this.
Wow.
So now, but guess what? Insurance doesn't pay for it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a lot. Mm-hmm. I mean, big pharma, people say all the time, our mental health care system is broken. No, it's not. No, it's not. It wasn't designed for Cashleigh.
No, it wasn't.
It's not designed for the people that need it. And it's not broken because it operates just fine for the mental health care corporations, right? For the insurance corporations and the politicians. It's working just fine. They're all getting paid. And meanwhile, we're all voting them in and not holding them accountable. And they're all getting paid. Meanwhile, we're losing tens of thousands of people to mental health every single year. So it's not broke.
It works exactly how they want it to.
It works just perfectly fine. 100% just fine. Yep.
That is so true. Yeah. Well, I know that you wanted to go spend time with your granddaughter.
I do. I promised her I'd take her to the trampoline park today, and I'm following through with that.
Yes, you are. Do you have any final remarks you'd like to say before we hop off?
I just want to tell you thank you. Thank you. Thank you for finding me and inviting me here. And also, I am very sorry for your loss. Very.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm glad you started the podcast. I'm glad that you started the conversation.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's not just me, it's you as well. So thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to help people.
Yes, we are. Yes, we absolutely are.
Thank you so much for watching Lost and Found. I really hope that this episode resonated with you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe below. There will be new episodes every Friday, and grief is hard, and you don't have to do it alone. And I love you, and I hope I see you next time.